All right, so sketching it in, definitely start with your center, right? Once you have it on center, it's easier to get it to be symmetrical. You need to capture basic proportions. You don't need to have it super precise. We're not drawing for construction purposes and all, so you just need to get close. So what I'm seeing is, I'm seeing the width, the widest portion, compared to the height. You know, it's very close. The widest portion compared to a height, it's just a little bit higher than it is wide. So I will leave this little bit of the opening here. This will be my top elliptical, and I will take the rest and dedicate it to the widest portion. If I do it more or less symmetrical on both sides, then it should be about right? So again, we're getting close to what we need. So let's see. Perhaps this should be just a tad wider here, because if I bring it right like this and like down here, how's that overall shape? I guess it's close. But I feel like perhaps if I keep it this wide, again, make sure it's half and half, right? Nice and even. Then I'd like to capture a little bit of its unique shape. So where the widest portion of it is, so again, side measurement, find where the overall shape of the side, where it goes in and where it goes in the opposite direction. So this is what I'm seeing, where it starts turning here and turning here. I'm seeing that this is kind of like higher, more like this, and then there is a little bit of a distance. See, it's not at the half level, but it's not too close to the bottom either. So that's why, to capture the unique look of this, this is what I'm doing. So then I'm seeing that when it comes down, it has that little bit of a kind of a slight thickness for that bottom where it does the touchdown, right? So I'll allow a little bit of the width for that. And that means now that my overall glass sides, at least sides, are gonna do something like this. Oh, a little more round here. And a bit round here, not too straight. At least I'm seeing that they're not too straight. Of course, there is this halfway, right? That minor center, this is our major center for these two halves. This is a minor one for this two. So now I just need to round this off nicely here on the ends. I want to get this pretty close to a good geometrical elliptical shape. You've already practiced that in your drawing class, so you should be able to get this really well. And why? Because that's the very edge of this glass, and there are different values right along this edge, right? So to get those values right, you need to have the edge drawn correctly. So also, this is glass, so there are some things happening here that make it look see-through. And how are the edges looking? The edges are pretty defined, right? None of the edges disappear. So I will be more or less guessing the openness of this elliptical just based on the looks. And I'll be getting this in that. So I didn't finish that elliptical here, right? I'm getting in already the thickness of that little platform. And what else I'm seeing in there? I'm seeing that there is like a, now I'm going more away from the actual structure and toward what I'm seeing in terms of different changes in color value and how the glass, the curvature of the glass distorts various objects when it reflects them and when we're seeing them through the glass. So I'm seeing that there's something like this going on, and within this form, on this side, about right here, it's going to be mostly darker with some lighter areas. Right here is going to be kind of medium. It will darken up a little bit more toward here, toward this edge. This edge of the glass is a bit, I'm seeing like a white stripe that goes right along the edge. And within that, it also gets darker toward here. And it's really nice and shiny right in here. And then it kind of becomes medium value. There is some darkening over here toward the bottom, toward where it touches down to the table. And then on this side, this is nicely defined because it's a lot darker. But right here, some parts of the edge are very bright and basically white. So I'm going to leave a little gap here with only a thin line, indicating that all of a sudden there is a strong reflection here. And that reflection becomes a slightly darker gray edge. So just so I don't have to solve all of these problems, all of these issues, they're not really problems. They're more like color value issues. I'm just building it in the safety net. All right, and what I'm seeing is like right here, this line almost disappears before it comes to this edge. See, so I'm gonna lighten it up right now so it's just barely visible to me. Once it's painted, it will not be visible. And I'm seeing that there is a little thickness to this edge, which I will add very carefully, because in this edge, once I'm painting, if I add some very tiny little areas with, if I leave them basically pure white paper, it will look like nice little reflections along this round edge. And the same thing, so now I can erase this and start straying away from my construction lines and adding the details of how it's going to be painted. All right. I'm going to add the bottom of this where it's slightly distorted by the glass, because I see it coming up right in here, just like this. Like a little arch is popping up. Then I'm going to add my reflections, like very bright reflections. There is one slightly off center right here. It's in the shape of the lamp that is stretched out almost like an upside tear shape. There's a couple of little ones slightly to the other side of center right here. right near the edge. If you draw them a little bit bigger than they are, it's good, because once you start painting, the brush may just intrude a little bit, and then you still end up seeing them, right? So then there is a couple of reflections from these lamps up here, and those are just above this one, just above this little arch that I drew. All right, so I will position one, and they're pretty round, but not perfect round. One here, and one kind of above it here. A couple of other ones that are tiny. Again, probably the same lamps, just reflecting from a different side. Everything else, pretty much, you can lift up the paint later. If they are not super bright major reflections, I'd rather you paint it and then went to that spot and lifted off some paint, then the reflection is going to be much more subtle. All right, I will leave a little spot for brightness of this reflection here, because it is, I think, again, our lamp with very warm light, and everything else is just slightly dark in here. All right, so now what we see through as part of the table. So I see that the table shows up here, kind of like at this angle. That's the edge of the table, the whiteness of it. But I see that it's getting behind the cup right here, where the cup starts turning down, and right here where the cup's turning downward a whole lot more. All right, so about the right edge, right? But what's happening to the edge inside the cup is that right here it rises and comes out right behind this bright spot. So it's kind of doing this. It's going right through this two reflections. One reflection ends up being within the white table reflection or see-through, and the other just above it. All right, then we have these two tiny reflections. It does the same thing, goes through them, one below, one above, and then it kind of starts to even out and slightly turn up this edge. So you see this edge is this edge reflecting and distorted by the glass. This corner connects to here, again distorted by the curvature of the glass. And the stripes in back, so I'm seeing my stripe popping up just over here. Kind of follows the same direction as the edge of the table, probably because they're all parallel. And right here, it kind of turns a little bit because there's a little fold, right? So the stripe turns. This is less critical. More critical is how this darker blue stripe, darker blue compared to everything else. How we're seeing it through the glass. Similar to this, it comes up kind of near the top portion of this reflection, and then it kind of goes a bit wider here. I see a couple of wobbles, like a wobble in here. Then it comes up and kind of goes rough this way. Actually, now that I'm seeing that, I need a more distance in here, so I dipped it a little too much. So let's make it a less dippy, milder dips. There we go, that's better. Here, for some reason, again, probably the curvature of the glass is going downward, not up, at least from my angle of observation. So I will go and darken it. And as you may have noticed, what is happening here is it's quite a bit wider here it widens over here. In fact, I can make it a little more here, more pronounced. There we go. And it's very narrow here. So again, it's one of those distortions by the curvature of the glass. And the more you pay attention to these distortions, the better it is. And in fact, it looks like maybe the dark blue even wraps around this shiny spot a bit like that. And it blends with overall darkness of all of this. In fact, I'm seeing it that I can extend the shiny spot higher than I guessed it before, and bring this darkness, that's going to be darker blue, a bit higher, and then it leaves us more of that medium gray here. All right, what is happening on the table? The shadow, from my angle of observation at least, is doing something like this. It's coming out more out of this end. And it's a very faint shadow. I'm seeing it on the edge more, so I'll darken it a bit more. I see it widens in this direction, but through here, it's very light, very light. And where it's a bit darker is right here. It's having another darker spot that is also widening. Has another darker spot over here that pretty much hides. And I guess those are slightly different edges of the glass where how they curve that cast those. All right, this pretty much on there, it's the edge, right? This is where the box/table ends. So for you, you don't have to worry about this part. It's fine. Nuance, detail. What is happening with the fabric is the least of your worries. You need to focus on the cup. All right, so we'll leave the front white. We don't have to finish it. It's not the point of this lesson. So what I would like to do is, because we have a lot of white in here, I'd like to go ahead and take away that pure white. So we are not bothered by it, so we're not focusing on it at all. So I'm gonna create just a very mild wash. First, with just a little bit of sort of like a beige color almost, right? That's for the background. So what it does is that it takes away that pure white and whatever the highlights that get left inside the cup will start looking pretty good. Shiny. Why am I doing it a little beige, a little on the yellow side, right? Is because it's warm, because all of these areas are still being reached by the direct light, and we can always go over it in a little bit later, and add other colors to it, adjust the value. So that's just the initial wash. And remember, it's going to be, as it dries, it's going to become lighter. Also, you see how I started here, so it's a little more intense, and by the time I got here, it's already milder, less pigment left. So I'm going to do the same basic value then. Basic value, but so I'm taking the same color as I mixed there, but I'm going to pick up a little bit of my blue and just to give it a bit more of a darker, still on the warmer side, but less bright, less vibrant. So this is should be more vibrant than here. See how value-wise it's too light. So I'm gonna say, okay, little more of my Indian red, my cadmium yellow for that sunshine warmth, and a little bit more of my blue to it. But very little bit, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and just go over that as well. Now it's darker value. So pretty much I can go over everything. I don't want to touch the edge because it's gonna bleed into the background until the background is all dry. But I can do this, and I can just cover all of these areas. Go around my highlights. See how I'm purposely letting this little drip sit here? That will keep it from drying up on this edge. And I can even go over that. Why? Because we are achieving the value. We're achieving that darker value first. Once I have the slightly darker value here, everything else below, every time I go with another color over to make that blue stripe, I'm keeping this untouched or almost untouched. Go around these highlights. Go around these two little highlights that are a bit critical. I want to keep them visible. And even here. Okay, so now pretty much the whole glass is slightly separating from the background, but it's separating in a kind of way that still has the warmth, still has more of that color to it, but it's a darker value, right? Slightly darker. All right, so while that is drying, I'm going to get some of that blue stripe in. It's just such a nice blue stripe. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my Winsor, give it slightly more purpley look. So pick up a little bit of the rose. And just so it's not super purpley, right? I'm gonna adjust it to be more like a ultramarine hue. That's a bit better, right? So Winsor by itself has a little too much green look. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the stripe. So first, stripe is quite a bit of a darker value compared to everything we're painting in, right? So even in the light, it's going to be quite a bit dark. So right now, I'm going to put this stripe in here. Okay, and I'm going to put it in here. And that's a basic layout. We're establishing all of our basic values, and colors just need to be close enough. All right, good. So now I will take the same value and make it slightly darker by introducing more pigment. Less water, more pigment. And tweak the color slightly. So this is what I got now. See, it's slightly darker than the other test, right? But I'm going to add a little Indian red to it, just a little. So not to overdo it, Why? Why do I do that? So it's less.
Make it less blue.
Less blue, and if the color changes, or if the value changes,
then how it looks like
color
the light
changes. Right, because here the light bounces to us, brings us a more true blue color. Here it bounces through the glass, and the glass, even though it's a pretty much clear glass, still adds a little bit of that color change still.
It makes it like more muted.
Yeah, sometimes it could be more muted. If you're painting glass that has its own color, then that will tweak it as well. And see, this is where I am glad that I drew all of this in more detail. This, how the glass warps my fabric, the stripe. Because now that I'm painting it, I can focus on more like my brush, where the brush is going and what it's doing, rather than the shapes themselves. Oh, the stripe didn't dry yet. Okay. Now, of course, all of this fine detail can be tweaked again later. Right? Or I'm using quite a bit of a big brush. If you want to switch to a slightly smaller brush, just to get around here, do it more like at the end. Okay. So still I'm successfully keeping the shiny spot. I only intruded a little bit into it, but that's also not a big deal. We can lift off some paint, especially now that it still is fairly fresh, right? Lift it off a bit. And if it's not all the way white or all the way clean paper, it's not a big deal, because even our reflections, they're not always perfectly bright, right? But they also change value slightly. So all of that is going to just help you keep it painterly. The main thing is we're keeping this very bright spot next to this quite a bit darker background, right? All right, so that's the initial pass. Look, it's already kind of starting to look like glass, right? I would say the only thing I would like to change or add is to make the blue slightly darker. Because that value, I'm trying to capture that value better, right? But I still have this slightly darker value on my brush. I don't want to like clean my brush, waste that paint. I'm gonna just wait for this to dry fully, go over that once, and then mix this color again, go over that again. Meanwhile, while it's all drying, I'm gonna start add a few more things. Like for example, I can add this little shadow. And that little shadow, if you look at the color of it, it's actually extremely similar to the color that we were using for the blue. It's kind of bluish gray, right? So I'm gonna do it very simple. Not overthink it. Sorry. Still recovering. I'm not overdoing it, not overthinking it, because this is the less important part of what we're doing. Okay. Just like that. And keep it. See, already starts to feel like it's a fold in the fabric. And leave it this way. Then, what color are all those sort of darker grayish parts of the glass?
The ones more on the left look kind of yellowish. Sometimes even like a little greenish.
Right.
The ones on the right look bluish to me.
Grayish blue.
Yeah.
It's almost like this color of the stripe affects how we see those darker portions. And this bright light from this lamp is quite a bit yellow, right? Makes this look quite a bit yellow golden. And maybe that's why this looks slightly more green here, greenish gray, right? So that means if we mix one kind of bluish gray color, and then we will start tweaking it to go in one direction and the other. So this is my Windsor blue and Indian yellow. Not the cadmium yellow, but Indian yellow, okay? So I'm gonna first get more blue into it, so it stays a bit on the greenish side. And then just so it doesn't look too brightly green, see, that's by itself. I'm gonna again take my Indian red, just a tad, and mix it in so I don't overdo it. Let's compare. See how little bit I've added?
Yeah.
And it changed, and that's good. All right, so let's go ahead. It seems like a nice medium, not too dark, right? While all of this is still drying, I'd like it to dry more thoroughly. I'm gonna go over, see, with my finer brush, over all of this. And kind of like establish my very first guess of this color and value. It kind of then disappears in there. And it kind of stays brighter over here. That's nice, I'm connecting it already. If it looks too bluish green, I wouldn't worry about it right now, because once I make this more yellow over a shiny reflection, I can bring that yellow over that, and that will make it even warmer, right? So as a first guess, this is good. Where else do we see that repeat? We kind of see it go a little bit. Oh, are you kidding me? Okay. Oh, that was fairly painless. So, where else do we see that happening? We see it a little bit more over here, so we might as well just come in here and completely cover this in this value. And this is becoming kind of a darker edge, so we can leave just a little bit brighter here and kind of bring it all the way. If it looks a little greener than what you're looking at, no problem, because we can always come back later and go over some of the spots with slightly blue hue. And then we're going to have that play of values in there, because it's actually something that's rotating rapidly, right? So therefore it reflects different colors and different values. I see that there's a bit more of a darkness right here. And then I see that it's pretty much dark here, and it has an interruption for a small reflection. Those reflections are not very strong. And then it continues all the way around. And I've very carefully completed that. All right. I have it on the brush. I don't want to wash my brush completely. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just add more water to it and have it very mild. Even more water. Very, very mild. And I'm going to use that slightly greenish hue to say that it looks this way here because the glass has some of that, perhaps a little bit of that hint of color. And where I see it is where the fabric that goes through the glass starts changing in value slightly. And that change goes right to the shiny spot, which actually helps us make the shiny spot look even shinier, right? Because there's forming a slight darkness around it. And then it kind of goes down and over this stripe. And it's not all uniform, so I'm just paying attention to what shape I'm seeing. And it kind of goes over that as well, over that. And the edges here are not so sharp. I'll soften them up, and I'll soften this up. softening them up with just a little clear water on the brush, right? And it helps it blend. And down through the middle, this part is also not sharp-edged. Soften up these edges as well. All right, so now I think while this is drying, I can darken this stripe overall. Oh, I wanted to darken it through the middle first. All right, I'll do it first. I'll go back here, still have that color. See how second time, same color, same value, but it's making it so much darker, right? You're now doubling the darkness. And of course, for us, that means that we are seeing all the reflections even better than before. All right. And I'm seeing that because of that slight darkening in here, some portions of this blue stripe coming through the cup are also kind of darkening. So I'm going to add a little more blue to it and a little more Indian red, not even rose, because I want it to look darker and not so colorful. From where you're standing, do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That will help to tell us that those are different and definite distortions. Adding a little bit here, especially because there's that shiny spot, will make it more shiny. And it's as if the fabric that goes behind this little table is getting darker because it's going behind. It helps to show that three-dimensional feel. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and make my ultramarine color out of my Winsor. Try to match it as close to my original. I guess it's good enough. All right, so let's go here first because I'm right-handed. And I'm darkening the whole thing, even over that shadow that I did. And then I'll go here. Still not purpley enough. Adjust. And if it's not all uniformly the same blue, and it's slightly purpley, slightly blue in other places, then it's even better. It's more painterly that way. Okay, here I went a little too far, so let's just clean it up a bit. See, even if you just push the paint with your finger, it lifts up enough off of the paper and kind of keeps it on the drier side, so it's not so, it doesn't create those spots that dry for a long time, all those drips, and create like a weird darker blob. Okay. I mean, some darker blobs, like right here, are forming. It's kind of charming. They are helpful. All right, so we got some of this. While this is drying, let's continue with adding various variations. So what I'm going to do is, like, I have a whole bunch of this blue, right? And I'm just going to grab that and add it to my green. And now I'm going to tweak that greenish color and make it a little more bluish. And I'm going to go where, well, I see that this is a major darker area in the glass. First, I'm going to go with one value over most of it. And then within that, once it's dry, I'll get more layers of paint, color and value, and tweak it to be more of the places where I need it lighter and darker. Okay. Here we go. Like that. Some of it is kind of repeating down here just before you get to the table. See, it's a bit wider on this end and it's a bit narrower down to almost none on this end. How about I now take the same color and value, make it a bit more purpley, and create this shadow. So first I'll make the darker portions of the shadow. See, because my fabric so far has this slightly mild beige, orangey yellow look, right? Pushing those shadows a little more toward the purple end actually makes it look good. Good harmony. That's about what I see in terms of those dark areas. Once this is dry, I'll go over the entire shadow with another value. And those parts will get darker as well. But while I'm doing that, is there any place that I can use that slightly purplier, right? I see that right in here, this area is slightly darker, similar to what I've done here, but it's not the same greenishness. It seems to be a bit more on the purpley end. So that's what I'll do. I will go right in here and I'll go over everything. Well, that's rather dark. So wash the brush, introduce more water, it becomes lighter, and go ahead, go over that. And I even see it extending over this part of the table. This is becoming more dark here. This darkness spreads in here, helping this highlight look darker. I see that there are some reflections happening. So I'll save this. I'll save something like this. I'll cover the rest. And then by the time we get more toward this end, and these two little reflections, it kind of starts to be, it rounds off, and this stays lighter. It's even a bit darker toward this end, so I'm just picking up more paint. And while it's still wet, just adding a bit more paint to here and toward this end. And before this dries up too much, I'll soften this edge. So when you're doing it, if you keep your brush strokes following somewhat the curvature, it will be very helpful. It will help make it look like glass, rounded glass. All right, so what else can I do? I can, for example, punch this up a little bit. It seems rather mild, don't you think? Mm-hmm. So I'll go back to where I have a little bit more of my greenishness here, and I'll introduce it back. I'll start more with around the highlight since it's so bright, stronger, and then the rest I'll let it blend. then I'm looking at what makes those stand out, because right now they're not standing out, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of a similar effect. So if I extend a little bit more of this darkness around these two little highlights, but keep it mostly around them. And then again, add all of this blending. Then it does the job of them standing out more. Let's go back to what's going on inside here. It's too uniform, right? We can add the same effect in there a little bit. Right on this end, it seems to be a little more greenish value. And I'll go over everything because then my rim of the cup is also becoming darker, and I want that. But toward here it stays warmer, and I'll leave that. All right, we can now go over this shadow. It's a good time. So getting back to my slightly purplier, very mild purplier hue, and I'll cover the whole thing. So a lot of light shines through the cup, makes the shadow very mild. Very mild. But now that I've covered it with more purplier, I see that toward this end it's sort of a little greener. And it's probably because the glass itself is not really truly clear, but it does have a little bit of that greenish-ness to it, right? So I'm introducing a little greener hue over the purple that I've already done. All right, now it's a matter of getting a little bit more of those edges defined and keeping the shapes nice. So all of your curvatures, all of those reflections, distorted or not, they are following curvatures. So for example, here I've already intensified the darkness. Some of this can receive another darkening, but the darkening is not right on the edge, actually. I'm seeing that it's getting darker, but it is not on the edge, it's more like this. And the edge is slightly lighter. Interesting. Where else do I see slight darkness? I see definite darkness more on the under part of this rim. Definitely darker. Is it all uniformly dark? No, in some places it's darker than in others. But with this value, I will first go and establish and say, visually say that this is actually darker overall. And later I can come and still give a little more darkness in some places, not everywhere. All right, I also see that the top edge of the cup is also very contrasting, quite a bit. It doesn't blend with the background very much. So if I go and just establish a very thin line right on the edge here, making sure that some of this rim stays lighter, some of it is darker toward the bottom, but right here on the edge, there's a fine line defining it, right? It becomes more defined. I can define it a bit more here. And where is it more defined? Kind of here and more defined here. Now that I got a good color here, good value, I'll come define it a bit more here. It becomes quite a bit thinner here. The highlight almost starts to wash out the edge of the rim. and it picks up in darkness right in here again. And kind of a similar thing is happening on the top. Very thin line. Okay. Now, pretty good color I got in here. How about this here? What kind of color? There is a little darkness on this edge, right? What kind of color should we choose? Greener or blue or purplier?
I think bluer.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's that stripe that's affecting it. So it's quite a thin line, so I'm just grabbing the same color as my stripe, hoping that over everything that I drew, a little bit of a pencil, a little bit of the beigey kind of warm color that I put in, that it will not look like that stripe. It will look somewhat like it, but not too much. Okay, so here we go. That seems good. Good value, and not too dark. And as it goes in this direction, it becomes a bit lighter. So while it's still wet, I will go ahead and drag this over my pencil marks. This is where it's becoming lighter, and then it becomes very bright, right? Shiny white. All right, now we can add a little bit more of the definition and all of this. Okay, so for example, this line here, that bottom of the cup, what do you think? More greener?
It looks a little green.
A little on the green on the right side. So we're going back to our green. But so it's not super green. Well, let's try this. This is kind of bluish green, right? Let's try this and see how it works. More important is that we get the value good. So how is that? Could probably be darker. You know what I'll do is first I'm going to go ahead and make this whole bottom slightly darker with this hue. And as it dries up, I will darken some areas. Okay, while I have this color in my brush, where can I make things more interesting? For example, it's slightly greener, and this is slightly greener. Here it's brighter, but here it's starting to get darker, right? And right on this edge, it goes against the shadow that we painted. And that's where it's definitely darker than the shadow. And that will make it stand out and make it look more three-dimensional for us. And that's what we want. Here we want it to be lighter, right? So here it's working to be lighter, and here it's becoming darker, and definitely darker than the shadow. Then in a very mild way, there's kind of like interplay of lighter and darker spots. It's actually not super easy to understand. What is happening in there is like a bunch of little things going on. So I will darken this because this is where the darkness starts again on the bottom. And right here, since not very clear, I see that there's like one line that goes in this direction. Let's make it a bit darker. One little one. Whole bunch of different distortions by the different thicknesses of glass going on. And some things are happening in this direction. And it also kind of blends with some of the background right here. The background in terms of the fabric that we're seeing. Making those shiny spots brighter, to more stand out. And I think if I leave it this way, it's actually good, unexplained. And it doesn't have to be all explained. All right, now I can go back and add more definition to the bottom. Some of it is kind of greenish, right? So let's create a slightly darker value. Dark value. And a little Indian red, so it's not super bright green. So some of the nice juicy green colors are not bad. We just don't want it to totally look baby green, right? We want it a bit more nuanced now. Okay, I see that right up against here, it's darker. Then there's a bigger darker area here, and it kind of stays a little darker. And kind of this way, there's like a almost an elliptical shape on its side. Okay, so it must be another distortion in the glass. And then over here, it starts blending and becoming lighter. Okay, and there is a slightly lighter area, similar in value to those. And then it becomes a kind of generally sort of grayish, greenish, and then it becomes that darkness. All right. So right in here we'll leave a few brighter spots, and out of them somehow comes out this area that then also makes this darker. It's part of the same distortion, it's just different colors they're reflecting in them. Now we've separated it from the rest of the glass, and when it's a little drier, we can add more definition to that. So I've mixed quite a bit of a darker value now. See, slightly greenish darker. So to punch up some of these areas. What I find interesting is like this one here on the corner. It's quite a bit dark. And then it disappears. Kind of blends. This one over here is not dark right to the edge, but it's slightly dark, and then it's really dark. And the shape of it is also not very certain. I'm sort of seeing like two shapes coming out of it. And then, you know what I see through that? Slightly reddish look. And I'm thinking like, why is this kind of reddish? Something must be, maybe it's that board that on the wall. I'm gonna add that reddishness through the middle while it's wet. See? And then I'm going back to my colors, and then I'm seeing that the other colors, other distortions in here, I'm just basically looking at shapes and where they're located. I see this kind of distortion, almost like a very long teardrop shape above this area. Then I'm seeing that on the end of this, there's sort of like this kind of darkening, slightly curved. Through here I look at, and it seems more beige, or it's almost like bright and then beige, so I'll leave it until later. Then I'm seeing that through here, there's more stranger type of shapes. And right now I'm not even straining to be super precise as to what kind of shapes they are, but as long as I get it close, right? You have any questions?
No.
All right, good. So I like how that red spot turned out. So that's what I'll do right here. I'll give this a slightly warmer but lighter hue. Very carefully. I don't want to overdo it, but I don't want to underdo it either. All right, that's good. And right here I see that it's a bit brighter, so I'll go ahead and lift off some paint. It's not as bright as this highlights, so I don't need to make it so bright. But I do want to give it a bit of a warmer hue. it is a warmer. So I'm going straight to my cadmium yellow and a very mild solution. And I'm adding cadmium yellow to warm it up a bit. All right. Well, I'm at this cadmium yellow and I'm so close now to finishing up everything. I'm going to give this warmer hue and I'll leave just one little piece white. I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to give this warmer hue and leave just one little center white. This, I'm going to cover everything. They're brighter highlights, but they're yellow, and to make them stand out, I will basically give everything a bit more of a warmer hue, like the light is shining on it, and they became more yellow. Back to my cadmium. Give this a little warmer hue, and this too can pretty much get covered up. All right, I will give this also the same treatment. I'll make some of it more yellow. I'll leave some of it more white. All right, what else can we do? We need a little more darker areas, right? In certain spots. So remember I was saying like this here. I'll come back to it, so I'll come back to it now. It seems to be going this way. No. And then it kind of stops and almost disappears. Then there's a slightly darker area through here. And this slightly darker area also kind of semi-elliptical, stops. And then this edge slightly darker, right on the edge. But then it becomes lighter. And this can still stand to be a bit darker. All right. Darkening that a bit. All right. Still can give this a bit more darkness here. A bit more darkness here and this part. Can get a more defined darker area here, where it's going darker toward those little highlights and those strange reflections of a darker nature that are going all over the place. I feel like there's a little more vertical reflecting going on in there. All right. I feel like I can still give a little warmer and darker hue on this end, just up against here. Not all over the place, just more toward the edge. I can also soften up some of this because it also is not all uniform. If we leave it exactly the same, it doesn't have that three-dimensional look. But if we soften up just a little darker value toward here and lighter toward here, it makes it better. Gives it more curved feel, more curving going on. I will add a little bit more of that darkening here. Now that I'm comparing everything to everything, I see how on this side, this area could stand getting, again, slightly darker value. And see how I start darker here, because that's where I see the most darkness. And as it gets away from that area, it starts to be less dark. And I'll take the opportunity to darken this corner. And I'll go ahead and make this darker. Remember, I was already trying to, but I guess it got all rather soaked in. Going around highlights just to make them a little darker, but only right on the edge there. All right, so since I'm so close to being done with this, do you have any questions or suggestions? Do you see if there's anything else that could be done better or improved, or you don't understand something, why I did something?
No, I think I get it.
Okay, good.
But the highlight, maybe just from where I'm standing, but the smaller one on the bottom on the right, that one, it looks more blue to me.
Yeah, it's probably because it's these lamps, and see, some of them are blue. So what it can still take is darkening of this area. So let's go ahead and darken it. And we'll darken it in a more grayish, not so blue. So I'll introduce more Indian red to my blue. And why would I do that? Why would I make it more gray and not blue?
To make blue stand out?
So if I want that highlight to look more blue, I don't want any similar blue in the neighborhood. Otherwise, it's not going to stand out. And also, you see, I didn't push it to the end because I do see a little bit of lightning going on. Not lightning like lightning and thunder, but this edge is getting lighter. And this edge is lighter. And then the darker thing is happening. Sort of like that. And so if I make it just plain a little grayer and even slightly warmer, right, with that Indian red, it becomes the slightly warmer gray. And I can extend a milder wash of the same thing around this highlight. It will help keep that more stand out, but just not as dark as this side. And once it's dry, I can keep this on the warmer and give that a cooler hue. But not so cool that it starts competing with the others. So I'm giving it a bit more yellow now. So it stands out as more yellow. Definitely warmer. Where can I add more yellow? Make it stronger. Sunshine. And I will take the kind of blue, see that my Windsor creates with the yellow. So more like very, very mild turquoise, okay? So if I make it a little too ultramarine, again, it's competition. If I keep it on the turquoise end, And even add that darker value in here like that. That will keep it cooler. Right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so while I have this, where can I make my reflection slightly cooler? So far I have a lot of warm reflections. I think these two guys are not exactly, they're kind of half and half almost. So how about I just add a little bluer shade here like this. Even though it's not all over the reflection, it's in the neighborhood. From a distance visually, it will look a little bluer. All right, so look at the thing overall and say to yourself, what else can I do? The key to it is make sure that the darkest areas of the glass are definitely darker. And I think I've got pretty good darkest areas. I think right here I still feel like it's not darkening enough for that distortion. Maybe now it will be better. Also, toward here, it kind of becomes all muddied up. The glass is obscuring it so much that even the color starts changing. So how can we replicate that? I'm going to take some of my more brown colors, right? So that's Indian red and some blue in it, but very little. And so I don't want to go with a too dark of a Indian red, but I'll give it just enough so the color changes, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to like muddy up, or not muddy up, but soften up this edge. So it's like very hard to see that it's not a sharp edge, right? It's now where there's so many distortions from the curvature of the glass happening that this edge is starting to be very uncertain. But just above it, it's pretty light. This is one of the lightest area here compared to the whole glass. You see that, right?
Yeah.
Where else is repeating that lighter area right in here. So that's why I'm going to keep it that way. I don't want to drag any more colors over it and distort that relationship. Also feels like it's a bit darker here. Soften up the edge. So you see some of the edges are quite sharp and not blended, and that gives it more of the stronger curvature and the feel of glass, and the others are much more subtle. Everything in here is more blended, here it's more blended, but some of this here is not blended and doesn't need to be. Just making some things a little stronger, a little more mysterious. Throw in a a little more color, like I've added red or warmer red in here, I think that perhaps some of it is also reflects in here. And some of it also seems like it might be repeating in here, like this. And you see I interrupted it, I didn't fill it all up because it doesn't look all the same. All right. Okay, so I'm pretty close to calling it finished. And if you get something as simple as that, think of it as a very simple layout. Don't overthink it. And focus on your value first. If this is dark here, this has to be lighter. This is light, this is darker. This here is the only place where it almost disappears. This is here where it's more defined, darker reflections in shadowy area, and the shadow is lighter. Here again it's a darker background, so the reflection, not only it stands out more, but it's also even lighter here where it's not so bright. And here we're becoming dark again, which means I can actually establish this edge just a little bit stronger. So far it's just my pencil marks. Now I'm gonna make sure that it definitely stands out more. Not here, but right here, right? And remember how I was saying, like in a few places I can punch it up darker later. I will not do the same on the back because I want the front rim stand out more. I don't like how I went a little overboard over here. It's making it looking too oval and not elliptical. So I'll come and soften up this edge. But that's just a technical thing because I can see the, drawing clear. Here is where the cup edge almost disappears. And when you're painting glass, if you find those places where the glass and the background pretty much blend together and you capture that, that's what's going to make it super excellent. There's so many masterful artworks that capture just that. All right, I'll stop right here. You can get started.